Welcome to the Effortless Swimming podcast. My guest today is the man with the best haircut in the southern end of Australia here, Paul Mackinnon, the balance runner. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Thanks. I knew it was going to come at some stage. I didn't realize it's going to be so early after the weekend.
May as well start off that way.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this podcast, Paul's got what we call here in Australia a mullet, which is it's the national haircut, I think, at the moment, 2022.
Well, I like to call mine a little bit more of a mane because it's the same length the whole way through that middle. It's not short at the front. There's no business at the front. There's party all through, so it's a bit more of a mane.
Yeah, it's a very trendy mane. It does look good. Well, Paul, I first heard of you through a mutual friend, Simon Hearn, and then I also heard that you're on the Triathlon Taran podcast probably 3 years ago now, and you got a huge response from that podcast because I think, from what I can see, you coach in a way that I really like and how I like to coach people, where you explain things very, very well, very simply, and you can relate to what people are doing, how they should feel, and you break things down in a way where it's just like, well, okay, well, that makes so much sense. And I think that's why you've got the reputation that you do now. And you've just come back from the States. You've done a lot of work with Nike and the Nike athletes recently. So what was that all about?
Well, firstly, thank you. Thanks for the accommodation. It was really eye-opening in a few different ways. Like, it was awesome to work with them, and they've got such a wealth of talent over there, and even sort of like the sub-elites, they're amazing athletes of similar to kind of like our elites. Like, it's incredible how many they have. I think the working with, in particular, someone like Galen Rupp or Emily Infeld, who are seasoned pros over there, to get over there, work with them, and understand that they haven't had that opportunity to have that improvement in a technique side of things was really a bit eye-opening, given that it is kind of the mecca of distance running and or middle distance and distance running. So to get that kind of confidence build, to get the reception and the feedback from them in such a positive manner was really, really cool. And then start to see how it can kind of influence and be a part of a broader improvement of running as a worldwide sort of thing, was really, really cool, because they do have the avenues to be able to do that and to get that out to a broader audience.
One of the things that we spoke about in the last couple of weeks as we've been leading up to this is with Nike, with their latest shoes, they found that you get more improvement with better technique from their latest shoes, and that's a part of why you've been, I think, doing some work with their athletes there. So do you want to talk a bit about that and why that is?
Yeah, so like the original contact I had over there was a guy by the name of Chris Cook, who was a guy that I stayed with and spent a lot of time with over there. Now he's a part of the design and development of the Nike Vaporfly, the Nike Alphafly. So if he hasn't been the actual designer, he's overseen it all. So that was kind of the introduction to him, and he was really interested in how I did what I did and why it was sort of getting those really good results, because he was seeing it from a shoe design and a shoe development side of things. He's got a really inquisitive mind and his biomechanical kind of background, but it was that side of things. Then subsequently, so over the last 18 months, they started to see a real pattern of athletes who moved in a particular manner, or actually, for a better term is like with good mechanics, and they were getting more efficiency, economy improvement out of the shoe than those that didn't. So they did have improvements irrespective of the movement pattern that they showed improvements irrespective of the movement patterns that they were presenting. However, the ones that moved really well were getting more out of it. So for him, he was starting to click and go, okay, so I met Paul. I can see the retraining, which is essentially what I do, is like the gait retraining rather than just like the biomechanical analysis. Historically, that's been a bit of a missing link, and it's highlighted now that the good movers getting more out of the shoe. And I've got this guy who's, really delving into the retraining side of things. So how can we kind of put it together? And that was kind of the real the reason to go over there, because he was just as inquisitive of going, okay, how's it going to be received? what can Paul do with a multiple different levels of athletes. So I was working with, like one of the best distance runners US have had, through to some high school athletes over there, and everything in between, just to see what would happen in the reception. And he sat into all the sessions, and for him, it was like, okay, it was a bit eye-opening to say, we can get these improvements at all these different ranges so that we can actually make the most of the shoes that he's developing. And that was kind of then, okay, how do we then put it into the design of the shoe? How do we put it into like the retraining or the training packages for each of these athletes from all these different levels? So that was the main reason for it. And then it's kind of grown a little bit from there.
And one of the ways that you love to teach is to use cues. And I mean, for me, the way I see a cue is it's almost like all these different movements, all these things that go into a certain movement. If you're thinking of every single step, for swimming, it's like, okay, enter your hand in front of your head, then reach forward and rotate your body, and then tip your fingertips. It's too much for people to remember. Yeah. So a cue just brings it all together in this nice little package that you can just think of, and it's much easier to actually do the movement because you're not overthinking things. So for you, like, when did cues become a way that you like to teach things, and how did you come up with the cues that you use?
I think that there's probably a couple of parts to it. So I think with running, it's always been about like foot up, whereas I'm very much top down. So everything that kind of influences the foot strike, the foot movement, the time on ground, and the mechanics of the leg are influenced by, the arm pattern, the body position. And I think that's become one of the really key parts of the differences that what I do, being, it's completely flipped. And the way I see it is, what should be most still, or what is the foundation of the movement, in this case being running? So what should be most still? And it is the torso. So trying to make that the best, almost like the first port of call, and then kind of working off that, rather than trying to aim at the foot, which is what is moving most, and trying to change that. It's kind of really flipped on its head of like, and I sort of think about it in like, strength and conditioning terms. You think, say, a squat or a deadlift, you're thinking, okay, what is most still? It's the feet. So make sure that they're in the right position for the person. And then you can kind of build up from that. If the feet are in the wrong position, or in a golf swing, the feet are in the wrong position, you're stuffed. So kind of work up and then out to what's moving most, and go from there. So if we're running, it's actually flipped. So, for me, it's like torso and then work down from there. So that part's a really different part. I think when I started to realize that was when I was running myself, I was trying to actually influence my feet, and I started by arms. It was almost like, for me, it was intuitive to go, okay, well, if they sound offbeat, or if they don't sound even, then how about I just kind of swing my arms in a manner that are even, and see how that influences the feet. And straight away it started to change. And I think that for me started to go, okay, well, what's the influencer? And if that's the cue that I want to work on, or if that's something that's going to influence, always thinking about what is going to influence most, and then work from there. And that's why I started to use cues so much more in a running sense, but it's also sort of infiltrated in just other things, like what cues can I use to kind of create a better movement pattern in a golf swing, or this or this. And I'm no, golf pro, but it just started to make me think about how they work, and they just work so much better because it's an influencer rather than a result-based, outcome focused.
Yeah.
And that's really helped. And being able to, as you said, focus on one thing at a time and give it time to become habit, because it's such a repetitive movement, both, running and swimming. It's just repeated movements, open cycle, open, keep going. Just give it time to become habit so that you don't have to think about it again. And then we can work on the next piece and the next piece and the next piece.
It's really interesting that you said people would often think about the feet first, trying to change that, and you went top down. I heard, this is a couple of years ago, I heard a coach say, that a swim coach talk about, he says he looks at, look at the feet, and then, and you can determine, like, look at that first, and that's determining what happens out the front of the body. But for me, it's always been the other way. It's always been top down, and I don't know why it's been that way, but similar thing, I find, like, often the legs and the feet and the kick is more influenced by what's happening out in front, because the legs will typically be a counterbalance to what is happening out in front of the head. So I've seen it really the same way in swimming. So yeah, to me, that's interesting, because it never really worked for me just looking at the feet first, because for me, it's more been what's the head doing? What are you doing through your shoulders and your body? Because if your shoulders are going to 90 degrees, which is too much rotation, it's like, well, of course the feet are going to kick out wide to stop you from continue going too far on your side. So I think that's quite an interesting one. Just listening to you talk about that there.
Well, it's almost like what we were talking about just before we got on the call as well, about the body position. If you don't have, and then coming down that chain, as you talked about, like kind of top down, if you don't have your body shape and the neutral spinal position that you're kind of talking about to then allow the roll, then, your hips are down low and your feet are down lower anyway. So you can try and get, like in my head, like without, again, knowing much about the swimming side of it, if you're trying to get the feet higher, but you've got like a real, extended thoracic spine and therefore kind of increased lumbar flexion, or it's kind of pulling it down, you can't have your feet up. So it's impossible to get the feet position where you want to be if you haven't got the first, the torso in the right position, and then, everything kind of sinking off that.
For you, what are, like, across the board, what are maybe one or two of those really common mistakes you'll see with the average triathlete or average runner?
I guess the two, if we start with the top down and thinking about it, so forgetting about like a foot strike or anything like that, because that's all influenced by what you're doing. I think the two things is not understanding what arms are for and can do for you would be one of the really important things. It's like they're not just superfluous to the body when running. They're actually a really important part to the running mechanic. However, they do not give you force. Like no part of the arm or the top half of the torso is touching the ground. So no amount of force that you're trying to put through or tension that you're trying to put through your body is actually implemented to propulsion. So can't actually work harder up top and get anything down bottom. In fact, it actually restricts the amount of movement that you can get from the legs. It's about trying to be as free and flowy and move as much movement as possible to allow the legs to move. So I think it's without understanding what the arms can do for you. So I think the way that I explain it to people is like your arms are for tempo, for balance, and to create lift. So if you don't actually swing your arms up at any point, if it's a flat movement, if it's a blocked movement, if it's a short movement, and you're not creating a vertical force up, you are not creating any lift. So we're not creating any flight or float or bounce if you're not creating any up force. It's almost like trying to jump without throwing your arms up in the air, just like having your hands in your pockets and trying to jump up. Like all you're doing is just pushing yourself off the ground without any additional arm swing. If they are not even, even if they were really poor movements, but at least if they were even, that at least it's sending the same message left and right down the body. So often you just see two different movement patterns because it's left or right dominant, just a lack of awareness of what the arms are actually doing. So at least they've got to be even to create some semblance of balance. And yeah, that tempo, that timing of movement, sometimes it's offbeat, the rhythm is off left and right.
Is that pretty common? Is it like the people are uneven with their arm movements?
Really common. Yeah, really common. Yeah. And it's amazing. It's not amazing, but it is amazing to a lot of people when they realize, geez, that is actually a lot different right and left.
And do you use video to show that, or just visually you're
so visually I'll pick it up in the first 5 meters. But then the key or the really important part is actually me getting the athlete to feel the difference rather than just tell them or show them. Because you could show someone, they go, oh, geez, that's different, but I don't feel that. So asking the right questions throughout the session to actually get them their own self-awareness of difference rather than me tell them and say, okay, feel right, that's what it's doing, feel left, that's what it's doing. It's like giving them reference points and kind of asking questions to get them to answer it rather than lead them as well.
Yeah.
So that becomes part of it, or the trick of it is like knowing that it's happening, but not giving away and asking them the right questions for them to feel and give you the answer without you telling them it. And that becomes the hard part as well, because you're like, fuck, I can see it. And I can't believe you can't feel it, but still going through that process of, just think of the funny bone in relation to the ribs. What's the right doing? And then think about the left on the return. What's it doing? Is it more? Is it less? Is it different? Is it the same? And trying to really tease that out until they get to feel the difference. But yeah. Super common.
Well, and then they take ownership of the of that thing that they're doing, because they're like, oh, okay, I recognize this, rather than we'll get sometimes people get told like you're dropping your elbow or you're crossing over. It's just like, and especially with some junior kids, it's like they'll get told they're doing the wrong thing. They know they're doing the wrong thing, but they just don't, like, if you just told that, it's like, well, great, how do I fix it? Or you never really quite take that on board to actually do anything to change it. So that art of coaching, especially by asking the right questions and getting the person to uncover it themselves, is great. And one of the things we do when we're in clinics is we'll play through the video of someone's stroke, and I'll ask them after we play through it, is there anything that you notice there that you might be doing wrong in the stroke, or you could do better? And most of the time, especially as we go through 2 or 3 or 4 people, when they've had a chance to actually see what some of those things are, they recognize it straight away. And after the 6th person, I'm just thinking, oh, you don't even need me here. You can pick this stuff out yourself, which is great because then they know what they're looking for.
Yeah. And you can see that in running as well. Like you and I could be standing watching, I think we talked about it on the weekend, standing watching 2 people run at the same pace. And whether you have a really good knowledge of running or not, if they're at the same pace, but one person moves really well, one moves really poorly, like it's really natural for us to pick out which one is actually moving really well. The next piece is someone might know why that is, like, why is that person moving better than that other person? Someone will go, I don't know. I know that one's better. I don't know why. And the next piece is, okay, what are the movements and the position they're creating to notice that? And then getting the person to feel it. And then the 4th part is like, okay, what would you change? What would be the first protocol to change it? And then that becomes back into your place. So the person, that 6th person, can go, oh, this isn't this. And then you go, what do you start with, or how do I change it? Okay, now it comes back into your area of expertise to go, okay, well, we'll start with this, then with this, then with this.
Yeah, there's a lot of that's right. There's a lot of steps along the way. One of the things I've found really helpful with, like, I've obviously put out a lot of YouTube content, we do the podcast and stuff, is most people who come along, they've got an understanding of what they should be doing just from seeing the videos, and they know what they should do. And then either like doing a video analysis or some clinics, then then it's kind of that last step of, right, what am I doing? And then how do I actually change my stroke in those certain ways? So there's a lot of steps that go into it.
The critical part of what I do in my coaching, which is like a real keystone of what I'm trying to teach, and even onto the online membership stuff, is like the self-awareness portion.
Yeah.
In that understanding of current, because the skill acquisition model that I use is this new way, old way, or old way, new way.
Yeah,
so
right.
You get that contrast, and the old way and new way. The first that old way or current way is breaking down the movement pattern. So the first session we spend about half an hour actually just getting a feel of that current, so that they understand what old way feels like. So they've really got this proprioception or kinesthetic awareness of what it feels like. So then when we make a change, they have their own internal contrast. So that piece of, as you're saying, feel this, you're doing this, you're doing this, and now I want you to do that. If they go off by themselves, if they don't have their own internal awareness, coaching tool to say, okay, this is what this feels like when I'm doing it, or this is what it feels like when I'm not. And when I'm not, it's A, B, C, and D is happening. And when I am, A, B, C, and D is happening. Then they can actually create that awareness of, okay, when I'm doing it, this is what it feels like. When I'm not, so I want to do it. And I want to do it. And I want to create that repetition. Because most times, I even remember like playing hockey when I was growing up and being taught a specific skill. And I was pretty disciplined that I'd go off and do my own training. Like, and I'll be by myself and I'd be, flicking corners or whatever it is, and thinking I'm doing it because, like this is the position or this is the movement that I've been coached, but then coming back and not quite getting it or not getting it at all. And it's like, what have you been doing? I've been trying to know, you weren't doing what you were supposed to be doing. You go, okay, well, how about you teach me what I'm not supposed to be doing? So it's almost unlearning the old version and knowing what that feels like, so that I can create a repetition, so that I can create the habit. And that becomes the real cornerstone of what I do. And then the cues on top of it being the secondary important part.
It's that we do quite a few contrast drills, and one of the things we've done in the with this 5-day catch challenge that I've had a lot of people go through is that you do the wrong thing first, and the wrong thing might be what you are currently doing. And for example, when someone enters and they reach forwards, some people will drift up and their fingers are pointing up and it slows them down. And so we'll get them to kick in that position, feel how slow it is. What's it like when you're doing that? And then when you change it and you get to the right position, how does that feel? And that builds up that awareness where that if they do start swimming again and they can feel, oh, I've got all this turbulence or this resistance on my hand out in front, I'm probably in the wrong position. So then they know how to change it. So it's that awareness, especially most athletes are self-coached that you and I probably work with, and even ones in squad. I mean, I know a lot of elite level swimmers who they won't get much technique feedback at all within a session because the coach has got 30 swimmers in there. So essentially, technique wise, they're probably self-coached still. So they need to have that awareness still.
Yeah, well, that's running to a T, because they don't do technique. So it's literally, as you group, run more, run faster, and that's how you get faster. Like that's literally, so if someone wants to do technique, it's what they've picked up as a kid, it's how they've done it, it's how they've always done it. Or it's, oh shit, I keep getting injured, so I'll try and do this myself, or what am I doing wrong? That is pretty much running 101. So the variation between good technique to bad is quite broad because it's just, throw some eggs at a wall and off you go. which isn't ideal.
With swimming, it's technique's so obviously important. Do you come up against people who will say, oh, there's not much technique to running, like you just run? Like what would you say to those people?
Well, I think, and I used swimming a lot to say like how important technique is, and obviously it's a real understanding of it, because the consequences of not being able to swim are pretty dire, but then when it gets into like performance side of things, like the hydrodynamics that can hold you back becomes so much more influential than say what aerodynamics in running. The thing that's really important in running, though, is the amount of shock and load that is going through the body upon each footstep. So it's actually not about performance. It's actually about injury prevention. And injury prevention and performance are on the same spectrum. It's just that you see a lot more of the former rather than the latter, because people just go out and run. So yeah, you hear it a bit. And I think for a long period of time, because I think technique hasn't been done well, it has just been, oh, well, you just run how you run and you just kind of manage it. But I think the importance of understanding that retraining is possible done the right way is actually going to be really beneficial. And I think that's been the missing link for such a long time for running.
I mean, of all the people that come to clinics, I'd say a large part of them are triathletes. And I get a lot of people actually who were runners, distance runners, ultra marathon runners, who can't run anymore, and so they've started swimming because they still want to keep fit, and but their knees have given out and lots of other things. And so I think if people who love running, if they could avoid that point, at that ending point where they just can no longer physically do it, probably because of bad technique along the way there somewhere, it's what a difference their life. How different their life would be as a result of just getting some technique help.
Well, particularly if that's something that they really, really love. And obviously they love an endurance-based activity, and that's why they've gone from running and they can't do it anymore, so come to swimming, or for some people cycling, which is a similar kind of pathway after running if it's not possible anymore. Because I think that we can load different tissues within the body, and we talk about, specific loading within training programs being, that 5 to 10% increase, and, being really safe and conscious of not building up too much too soon, which a lot of people still do wrong. So there's like one poor part of it, even movement aside. But if you're not loading tissue that can adapt in that manner, then it doesn't matter how safe you are. So if you're moving in a really poor manner, and you're hitting and loading bones and joints with muscles and tendons as an assister, then it doesn't matter how safe you are. You're going to hit a breaking point. And then if you're loading those, bones and joints, they're going to break down. And at one point enough, they're not going to recover. Whereas if you actually flip it, and if you are moving in a manner that you load muscles and tendons over joints and bones as the supporters, then all of a sudden you can build up resilience and conditioning, because you're actually loading a tissue that can adapt and adopt to a movement pattern. But the movement patterns are really different. It's almost the difference between walking, which is a leverage, full leg, bone system mechanic, to running, which should be a little bit more upper leg, and using muscles and tendons to create stored energy and almost like a springboard kind of return of energy. It's two different movements.
And is there much difference between the different paces? Now, I'm not talking about 100-meter sprint here. I'm talking about something from like an all-day steady pace with your running, like a jog, compared to where you're starting to get into that sort of 5K, 10K sort of pace and effort. Is there much difference in the technique or how you would teach someone, or does that pretty much carry across the board?
No, it should carry across the whole board, and even up into sprinting for some, into some regard, because an efficient, powerful movement is an efficient, powerful movement, irrespective if you're going at 6-minute pace or you're running it flat out. If you're getting it from the right area and you're doing it the right amount of times or more times or big range or whatever it may be, like somewhere in that range, it's just a smaller or a bigger version of a powerful, efficient movement. So if you look at someone like, someone who's probably like the flag bearer of technique at the moment, because he's phenomenal at running, but also because of how he moves, is Eliud Kipchoge. Like he's a phenomenal mover, but he moves the same whether he is running at, he probably wouldn't run much slower than 5-minute pace, which is really disappointing, really disheartening. But then he runs at 240 per kilometer pace. It's the same movement pattern done bigger and or more often. It doesn't change. So you can just see him as the same pattern, then he goes faster or slower. So even when he's starting to go faster or slower, it doesn't look different. It's just a bigger or smaller version.
Yeah, gotcha. And with these things that you teach, you've got quite a few cues. You mentioned your online membership, like there's a number of cues there. How long do you see it taking for people to notice a difference with their running? And then how do you recommend that they implement this stuff? Because when we do our clinics, we talk about doing a couple of drills in every session in your warm-up to set yourself up, and then just go about your main set, because it's about the frequency of doing things. It's not about how long you do them for, because it's changing that muscle memory and the technique. Yeah. And so we harp on about frequency and just doing a little bit of it in the beginning. What's your approach?
The way I work is very much, like one cue at a time, and allowing someone, a good 4 to 6 weeks of actually just focusing on that one thing. Easy pace, sessions, speed work, whatever it is. It's like, this is your cue to work on for the next, could be 3 to 6 weeks. Now, depending on the cue, depending on the individual, depending on how often they run, how quick they adapt, it just depends. There's a varying range of how quick someone can adapt and implement it into their habitual movement pattern, and that becomes into each individual. So the stuff that you talk about on the online stuff, it's, all the cues are set out, but it's also set out in a manner that gives the athlete the knowledge to understand when they'd implement it, how long they'd hold it for, and then what to go to next. So it's all kind of set out in that regard, and it is very much give yourself time. Think about one thing. Don't think about anything else. Be aware what it's doing for you and what it feels like when you're doing it. Be aware what it feels like when you're not doing it. And there'll come a time where it becomes a natural movement pattern. And then that's the time where you can actually move on to the next cue. Yeah.
Yeah. Most people don't give the things that they're practicing enough time for it to kick in and make a difference. And I had someone on the podcast probably 12 months ago now, and she said she came to a clinic. She was practicing things for, I think it was like 10 weeks. She was practicing those things for 10 weeks. Time stayed exactly the same. And then all of a sudden something clicked and it came together. And then right away, she was down like 10 or 15 seconds per 100 when it all just started to come together. And that's when it becomes the habit that you don't need to think about. It becomes subconscious, and you can just go out there, you can focus on your pacing and your effort, and you don't necessarily need to think that much about the stroke, because it's just that new new habit that you've formed. So yeah, it takes time. Some people are a lot quicker, obviously, 4 to 6 weeks. Some people it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that just becomes up to the individual. Some it's similar to like you'd coach different individuals differently just because of their language patterns, their experiences previously. Like you need to kind of, I don't know, work, not because everyone's different, which they are. It's more about allowing that individual the best possibility of understanding and therefore implementing it. But I think the thing about running is that because it is such a like heavy impact or body impact sport. I mean, if you're doing something better and you have that new way, old way awareness, if it doesn't feel better immediately, it probably isn't. It might be hard to continually implement it because it's not your habit. And that becomes a really strong cue. Like that brain is aware. It's like, geez, that actually feels better. I got to concentrate on it. And I do have to make sure that I'm continually doing it. But I can feel when I'm not doing it because it doesn't feel as light, as free, as, as floaty, or whatever it is, depending on that cue. So you get that real kinesthetic awareness of better and go, shit, I'm chasing that all the time until it becomes habitual. But if you've got, like you mentioned, like if you've got 2 or 3 or 5 things, like it become really critical of like running in particular programs or 2-hour long sessions and seminars where people are running in a big group for starters, and then being given like 5 or 6 different things to go home for and practice. Now they might be the right things. So like I've not been critical of the information given. It's like they go home and if you're focusing on one thing, there's 5 things that aren't being focused on. And then well, focus on the second thing. And then there's still 5 things that aren't getting focused on. And all of a sudden, 3 or 4 or 5 weeks down the track, you've been thinking about these 4 or 5 or 6 different things. None of them are habit. And straight away, someone will just go, stuff it. Like it hasn't changed anything. I forget it. I'm just thinking of all these different things and none of them are becoming habit. Because it doesn't have time and it doesn't have focus. And so it doesn't become habit.
Yeah, that's it. What I say to people at the end of a clinic is we'll often give them 3 things, sometimes 2, to the big rocks that are going to help them move forwards. But then I'll normally say, look, spend the next 4 weeks or so on this thing, or maybe 2 things together if they're sort of related. You can do the 2. But yeah, that's it. Don't try and do them all at once. Don't even, you've got 3 things. Don't try and do them all at once. Just pick 1, maybe 2, and then you can move on to the next thing. And there's an order of things you should work through. We've got our 5 core principles that follow that order. You've got your cues on the membership there. You've got the order there working sort of top down. So yeah, and like it requires patience. It requires people to know what to expect going forwards in how they will react to it, and to not be looking for those speed gains straight away necessarily, because it takes time. But with that long-term focused person, they're the ones that 6 months, 12 months down the track, they're going to be the ones that are running better because they're being willing to just commit to it and take the time to practice.
There's a blessing and curse with running in regards to how many steps you take in a minute. So how many strokes per minute, like is a gauge or a rough, between easy pace and, when they're going harder. But where is that range sitting for swimming?
Yeah, you'd say most people would average like 50 strokes a minute, if they're swimming comfortably. And that might go to between 60 to 70 for your average person when they go fast.
You do have like a little bit of time per stroke to probably work on, 2 or 3 different things. Because once you do catch and then a pull, and then you got the other side. Let's just say for those 2, I might have no idea because I'm horrible at swimming. But you've got maybe 1 second or maybe slightly more, slightly less per stroke. In running, you've got 3 steps, 2 to 3 steps in each second. So it's like it's happening really rapidly. Right. It's almost impossible to think about 1 or 2 things, 2 or more things each step or each movement pattern, because there's going to be 2.5 to 3 per second.
Yeah,
just happening. So there's it's almost impossible. Whereas I can completely understand if you've got like a bit over a second, people are pretty good to kind of go bang, bang, and then next, and bang, bang, and then next, whatever it means. And then until that becomes habit. Whereas running, it's a blessing that you can get so many repetitions in one run. but it's also a curse because you can't think of anything more than one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. I didn't think about it that way, but that is one of the good things about swimming is, they can do too. If it's head position and maybe your alignment, you can focus on those two because you've got that little bit more time. But running happens very, very quickly. And so for someone listening to this, and as I said, we've got a lot of triathletes who listen to this and people who run for general fitness. Where can they find out more about some of these cues that you're talking about, and where to find you?
So there's a fair bit of information about the membership program on tbrunner.com. So the balanced runner, but it's tbrunner.com. Information about the program, what it looks like, how to be setting up. So there's that sort of stuff. And then in regards to what I do, how I do it, there's a fair bit of information on Instagram about some of the new and old, some of the success stories. So they're probably the two best ways to kind of look at it. So Instagram is @thebalancedrunner, or one word. They're probably the two best ways. But yeah, membership specific on the website, what I do on Instagram, that's probably the two best ways.
Yeah, fantastic. And those that are listening to this, if you do want to become a member to Paul's membership there at Improve Your Running, use the code Effortless on checkout, and we've set up a discount there for the first month. So, Paul, appreciate you coming on. And when I sort of first saw what you were doing with your coaching, I thought, oh, this is the effortless swimming for running. I really like your approach there, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing some of those things. And we got to catch up on the weekend. It's just I think we're in a pretty similar place in terms of our coaching and who we like to work with, how we like to do it. And I'm learning all the time, and I like learning from people in different sports, and even just some of the cues that you use and how you approach it, like working top down. It's good to see how you do it, because there's just so much you can learn from different sports. So I'm going through your membership at the moment, and even just I was watching one there, and you're talking about how you hold your hands. So it's like hands sort of up near your pecs almost, and got the elbows bent. You're talking about this triangle if you're looking front on from the elbows to the hands. We talk about a power diamond in a similar position when you're under the water. It's like, oh my God, there's so many correlations here. That it's quite funny seeing that. So yeah, I'm enjoying watching that. Well, and I appreciate you being on the podcast.
No, it's that, like on the similarities, like you're talking about, we're all similarly shaped bodies, so there's going to be like similar angles. Like we're all coming from the same bit of plasticine, and then it's like the movement's different and what angles we're going to use from there. So it's why it becomes probably cool in regards to like we're using a similar plasticine model to start with, but then we're look, really appreciate you having me on the podcast, and but also I think for some of the listeners, like Brent's been really influential in helping me get to the point where I'm at with the membership program. Like you're really influential in saying, well, you got people who want to actually get better at running but don't want to do one-on-one, and you're not really providing them opportunities. So you've probably given these guys more opportunity as a result, just in the running sense, which has been really cool, and like I'm very appreciative of that side of things too. So kick my ass into gear a little bit, but also provide a different perspective to it, which has been really appreciated.
Well, I remember chatting those couple of years ago where you had a little bit of a hang up on, like, I want to make sure people are doing these things correctly. So I'm only doing one-on-ones. And I had a similar thing when I first started. It's like, I want to make sure that people are doing this 100%. So I'm not going to put stuff out there. But the thing is, like, there's people that want to improve their running. And if you don't teach them the stuff that you would teach in person, then you're going to be limiting it to probably 1% of those people who could learn that stuff and improve. And the amount of people who have just watched my YouTube videos and they've emailed me and said, like, oh, I've gone from this time to this time, and I love swimming. It's like, well, that wouldn't have happened if I was just too caught up in just like only doing one-on-ones. And so I'm glad you took that step and put it together in a program online where people can, wherever they are in the world, they can go through it on their own time, and they can learn those things that you do teach in person. But I think as a coach, we are perfectionists, and we want to make sure that everyone gets a good result. It is hard to sometimes just let that go. But,
well, it's kind of, it was a bit of that letting go, and not, I mean, the quality is my number one value for what we're kind of doing. So, but you can still create quality in that format and understanding that, it's not the same format. So whilst it's still, it's still creating that quality that I pride myself on, just in a different way. And I think that became really important for my mindset as well. I wasn't trying to, scale a business. I wasn't trying to create anything more in regards to a financial side of things. It was literally creating another option of quality. And then that really flipped my thinking as well. I was like, no, okay, so now, and then I spent 9-10 months just of creating the quality. So it took ages to kind of put it down. It wasn't just like, record, go bang. It was literally, okay, make sure that I'm explaining it in a manner that will give the best opportunity to get the outcome from this format.
Yeah, it's good. I'm kind of going through that at the moment with our beginner freestyle course. I was hoping to have it done by like January or February, and I'm just not. Yeah, there's still a bit more work I need to do. But that's right. You want to keep the quality up there because that's what your reputation is built on, is the quality, and it's really important. So and you've certainly done that with the membership. So thanks again for being on, and I'll get you back on down the track as well once I get a chance to implement some cues into my own running and be sub 3 minute pace for 10K.
Yeah. Well, look, if you can do that, and I'll hang my hat on that.
Put me on the front page of your website.
Bloody oath. Maybe I need to start I'll do similar and start to get in the pool a little bit. Although coming into winter is the wrong time to be getting in the pool.
It is.
Doing your 5-day catch thing.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate you being on.
No, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.